Maybe one of the things we could do real quick is just kind of tee up this conversation with Ray Lane. And you know, we've been, of course, at Information Week watchers of HP for quite some time. Mr. Lane joined us at the Information Week 500 conference not too long ago to talk about what was happening at HP and some of the direction that HP was heading in. And he, what I enjoyed the most was he's very frank and honest about the direction that HP was going in. He probably spelled out for us in maybe the clearest way why HP was making the moves that they made. And so, so without further ado,
yeah, well, let's welcome HP's chairman of the board, Ray Lane. Ray, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Happy to be with you.
Great. Well, Ray, it has been, let's say, a tumultuous last few months there at HP. We've had a new CEO. That CEO is now gone. The acquisition of a big software company, the exit of the PC business, getting back into the PC business. But now you have a new CEO in Meg Whitman. Are you sleeping any better at night?
It's an interesting way to put it. Let me correct just a few things you said. First of all, we never exited the PC business. So I've had people say that over and over again. And obviously, we did not communicate it very well. But if you go back to August 18th, what we actually said, what Leo actually said, was we were reviewing strategic options. So, and then we later clarified that to talk about looking at one option, which was to spin it out. Because we have had a lot of feedback from shareholders and Wall Street that we are, and at the time we were selling shares below breakup value, it's incumbent upon the board and the shareholders to look at whether there would be value to shareholders of spinning out large units. You know, in other words, if you don't do it to yourself and look at whether you're more valuable that way yourself, somebody else will do it to you or for you. And so that was the purpose, and it would be very hard to do that with PSG at a $41 billion size without it leaking in some way, without it, you know, it would take 6 months to a year to really understand it, to really do the analysis, to find out whether this was doable, because you can't simply spin off a division that big without setting it up as a potentially very successful company. You have to give it assets. You have to make sure it has a board. You have to make sure it economically makes sense to both companies, HP and the spin out. So there was no way to do this kind of behind the scenes, and so we decided to announce that we would look at it and evaluate it. And so there was never a plan to exit the PC business or get out of PC. I mean, all the scenarios I heard about closing it down, getting out of PCs, we don't like the business anymore, was simply to say, would shareholders and would customers be better off if we separated? Because PSG could offer equipment other than HP, and HP would be free to do whatever it wants to do with other equipment other than HP. And
let me ask a follow-up.
The cash that's generated by PSG might be more valuable as a standalone company. So I just want to make sure I have that corrected. That said, we didn't analyze it. We decided not to.
So my follow-up question is, what is the one thing that changed that said, okay, we've looked at the options, we don't like them anywhere but keeping it in? What was the one thing that kind of tipped it back?
It was too expensive. The economics didn't work. So it would have been, you know, long term, maybe it would have benefited shareholders in some way at an operating level, but the cost to do the separation, the cost to set up two companies, the cost to each company, and especially to HP, was too great. So it was not a good thing for shareholders, and the market actually gave us a lot of data to say it wouldn't be good for customers.
You know, Ray, one of the things that when we look at HP versus the traditional competitors that it faces, everybody seems to have sort of the same sort of business alignment, if you will. We have obviously a very robust server division, PC systems, networking. You're also in the IT services space. For example, you know, you've got EDS, and you know, IBM's got global services. Dell had what was Perot. You've got the software. Everybody's now in the software business. What is the secret sauce? Is there any room for innovation if you look at all of that alignment for you to rise above IBM and Dell in this space?
So I think there is differentiation amongst those companies, but you're right. When we serve the Fortune 2000, we're basically we're talking about solving complex infrastructure and application problems. So we're all kind of talking about the same thing. I do think that we are more of a technology company than Dell and IBM. IBM is becoming known as a service company. So if you look at how it is evaluated, how it is looked at by the market, both Wall Street and by customers, it's known, and it goes all the way back to the days of Lou Gerstner, that it became less of a technology company and more of a services company. Now what's happened is they've added a lot of software. So I would say software and services have become more important than hardware. Dell kind of started from a standard PC server base, has never been known much for innovation, but they've grown in this area, and then they've added services, virtually have no software at all. So I'd say that the differentiation is that we are a much greater part of our revenue comes from hardware. It comes from servers, storage, and networking. And networking is a differentiator from IBM and from Dell. So I think with the 3Com acquisition, with other things we've done in networking, I think that our competitor there is Cisco. It's not Dell and IBM. So I think there's much more revenue devoted to technology infrastructure than there is at IBM and Dell. And then in the services area, I think we're different sizes in the services area, but we do very different things in the services area. We are a software company of about, let's say about $4.5 billion now. So I think we're smaller than IBM in software, but much larger than Dell in software. So you'd have to reach in, and then of course there's no PC business at IBM, there is at Dell. So if you reach in under the covers, you'll see a much different story. So I think it's where we kind of went off course slightly in the last year, thinking that we could increase more rapidly than physically possible the amount of software we do, because HP fundamentally is a hardware company surrounded by software and services, and we have to, if we're going to continue to be a $100 billion plus revenue company, it's going to largely depend on hardware and technology to take us there.
Ray, you're mentioning that hardware is one of the big parts of your portfolio, but in the move to the cloud that a lot of enterprises are taking, as well as the move to virtualization, you do the math, it means there's less demand for hardware overall. How is HP going to maintain the revenue growth when there's fewer servers to sell to enterprises?
There'll be the same number of servers. There'll be more servers. They may be in a different place. So they may be in public clouds or private clouds, but you can't offer more services without more servers. Okay. Now, obviously, there's efficiency built in. That's always been built in, and servers become more powerful, offer more, more MIPS for less money. But that doesn't change. That formula doesn't change. So someone will be buying the servers, and if it's in a public cloud, it may be a different service provider than in a private cloud, where it still might be inside the enterprise.
Ray, in the latest earnings call that Meg did with analysts, she talked about investing more in R&D, which HP did last year, so it's even more on top of that. Kind of pictured 2012 as a rebuilding year, and 2013 as the growth year. And kind of said that back a couple years ago, HP maybe cut a little bit too much muscle. Is it possible for HP to grow fast enough through invention, through HP Labs?
Yeah, I think it is. Again, you have to look under the covers. So you can't simply take the R&D number at HP and divide it by its revenue. Again, you have to take out certainly some of the services revenue. Tiny amount of R&D might be devoted to services. You take out the software piece is a very small piece, which has higher R&D, and you get down to, okay, what's the core hardware? Basically the servers, networking, storage, PCs, and printers, okay, and imaging, which is our core innovation, and what's our R&D against that. I believe that what you said is true. I know it to be true, that over the last 5 or 6 years, R&D has been cut back too much, but you can't simply say it's just we're at 2% R&D. I don't recall exactly what the number is, so don't hold me to it, but the number is at least twice that much or more if you go by division by division. So if you take Dave Donatelli's group, which is servers, networking, and storage, that R&D number against his division revenue would be much higher, right? 5% or something like that. I could get the right number for you. We've got to increase that number. Okay, so yes, and HP Labs has not, stopped inventing things, but it may be licensing some of its patents outside of HP. We got to start looking at what we're doing in HP Labs, focus on nearer term opportunities to take things out of the labs and put them to work. But as you can see, over the last several years, we've replaced some of that R&D with acquisitions. So we've kept up with the market in terms of technology. We've just used acquisitions of both software and hardware to keep up, whether it was 3Com or it was 3PAR or it was ArcSight or Fortify. We've kept up with the market by acquiring. I think longer term, we want to do that by inventing things ourselves.
Okay, well, Ray, thank you very much for joining us here on Valley View. We're out of time. We want to thank you for joining us, and maybe we'll come back for a future Valley View.
Hey, thank you. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay.
Great. Well, I would like to thank all of you viewing in the audience as well, including, of course, our own studio audience here. You guys have been great. As David and I talked about before, we'll be back on January 25th. Keep checking for details on our lineup there. And in between that time, we're doing a lot of video from CES. On behalf of UBM TechWeb and Information Week, I'm Fritz Nelson.
And I'm David Berlin. Thanks for joining us.